Hi, everybody. I am returning with more SummerWorks Performance Festival coverage, and I'm joined by Adam Lazarus. It's so nice to connect with you again.
Yeah, you too. Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
So, Adam, I know you from work that you've supported in the theater scene here in Toronto in the past, but you do many things in the world of theater and the arts here in the city. Can you tell us a little bit about your different hats that you wear?
Yeah, sure. So the different hats I wear, I think like any Canadian artist, we have to jigsaw our lives together so that we can be sustainable. I guess that's the right word, or we can afford, rent.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'm a theater maker, I'm a performer, I direct, I write, I consult with a lot of different people, and I'm also a teacher.
Right.
And that has been one of the main thrusts of my artistic life.
Mhm.
So I went and I studied in France under Philippe Collier a long time ago and came back to Canada at a time where bouffon, and I focused in on bouffon, and it was at a time where it really wasn't being done that much. There were, of course, there was like Mumpet Smoot and Karen Hines and Sue Morrison and some amazing teachers, but I was offered a couple of teaching jobs. And so I just kept doing it. And I love it. I love teaching. I love working with voices and learn. I feel like I'm always learning from everybody, which keeps
Right.
me loving the theater.
Why bouffon? What was it about that
Yeah.
way of expression that appeals to you?
I feel like I have a couple of different ways to answer that. The first one is because at I was kind of good at it. Like making fun of things, and I felt like innocence wasn't my path in when I was at Philippe Gaulier, and he saw something in me. He's like, "You're good when you sort of you poke us,"
Mhm.
and and then I interrogated that thought for a very long time, and then I actually think we don't get enough of it. And
Mhm.
I, again, back to teaching, when I'm working with students, they're like, we love Buffon, we love it. Because how do you give voice to these enormous problems without standing on a soapbox and being like, you're racist, you're a misogynist, you're causing the world to end, you're like supporting genocide, whatever. It's like, I don't know, that's a protest. So how do we do that in the theater? And Buffon is mocking those atrocious human beings or complicated thoughts. And
Mhm.
I think it never gets old. Like there's always going to be something that we need to just poke at and take down a couple notches. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I asked that because I think I appreciate it too, and I don't see it enough. And then when
Mhm.
I'm in the bouffon like a experience in a theater performance, I'm like, all right, like we can go about this dialogue in
Yeah.
like so many different ways without it feeling like I'm being, someone's pointing the finger at me or, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So the co-writer of the show that I'm doing now, Guillermo Verdecchia, he
Mhm.
has this great line. He says, "There's not one way to the revolution, and satire is one of them."
Mhm.
When I say satire, I mean bouffon, and because
Yes.
some people don't like it, it's aggressive. It's
Yes.
really it can make people feel very uncomfortable, and it's not for everyone. But it doesn't mean it doesn't contribute to uh, creating equity and creating equality and
Mhm.
justice in the world. So
Yeah, and it adds to the discourse, right? And I think it's okay to make people feel uncomfortable even through arts. I mean, I think that's the whole point of being in the arts in general,
I
to
couldn't agree
some
more.
extent, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we
Um,
can have
go ahead.
conversations outside. It's like the art does something to us, and then we have conversations outside the theater, outside the dance studio, outside the concert, whatever it is, and then real change happens. Like I don't know how to change stuff. I just know how to make plays and ask questions, you know.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's sort of why we're here too, because you're going to be performing this piece called Verses at SummerWorks, and I know you've been very busy rehearsing. So for anyone who's watching, listening, um, Adam is running around rehearsing and making time for us to chat. So thank you. first of all.
Oh my gosh, it's my pleasure. I just want like this because art's hard. Oh my
It's
goodness.
hard, I know, and we thank you for it. Um, so you are using the bouffon as experience as inspiration for verses, right? Just so that I understand correctly. And you're exploring some really interesting themes in verses that honestly, when I read the description on the site about it being, Gerald Bloom, it's his birthday, he's being pulled every which way by everything and everyone.
Mm,
And we can all relate to that sense of, do I even have enough time to do life,
mm,
whatever
mm.
life is for each of us,
Never like this. Yeah.
right? Um, what was the seed that sparked this character and the story?
Yeah. So I I started this pre-pandemic. So I was in the midst of another show and I went through one hell of a year where my father died, my mother had a brain tumor and a post-operative stroke. My sister went through a very messy divorce. My hair started to go white. We had a moth infestation.
Oh,
And another thing, which I'm not going to talk about now, but it's in the play.
okay, that's fair.
And it was like boom, life. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's all right here. Everything everyone said was going to happen is happening. I feel I don't know if fortunate's the right word, but I just had a life where those things were a bit more abstract or a little over there, or I had time to process a lot of things. So, um, it was intense. Like, what did I say? Like, nobody was lying about any of it. Death, disease, divorce, my thinning hairline. It's all here. And I felt like this feeling of like, was a baseline.
Mhm.
And I would ask people, I'm like, do you feel like this kind of underneath it all? And they'd be like, anxiety. I'm like, kinda, yeah, but not, it's different. It's
Right.
sort of like, I think we all hate each other and we don't know what to do and we're not being good livers and we want to be good livers and we should be more good because we have all these tools to make us better, but we're not. And then we feel guilty and then we feel angry and then we feel like I just shut off, like, and that sort of, and everyone's like, uh-huh, uh-huh. I'm
Yes,
like, that's
like
what my
me
show
right
is about.
now, right?
Totally. And I'm like, that's what I want to, that's the feeling or the impetus of the show was like creating this feeling of
Mhm.
somebody who's just like, I don't even know how to get through the day right now. And not because I don't want you to dismiss it as like, oh, he's got anxiety, he's got depression, he's
Sure.
going through a midlife crisis. It's like, it's kind of those three, sure. And the,
Mhm.
like, how do we be good livers? It's
Mhm.
really challenging and make a waste-free lunch.
Right. No, and you know what? You're hitting some points for me because I also think it's about, reaching certain age milestones,
Yeah.
but also the pandemic created a new baseline for each of us. That's how I've talked about it with different friends as well, in
Mm.
that my baseline pre is completely different to my baseline now, and even during those years of being shut down, shut in, whatever way,
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
life was disrupted. So I think I think a lot of people can relate to this feeling of like, oh my gosh, it's too many things. It's not just
Yeah.
one or two things, right?
Yeah.
Affect our baseline.
It's everything. And then like kindness feels hard or I feel like guilty if I'm not. And um I think this I sometimes feel these days that even when people are at the party, oh, I should also say I wanted to do it from the perspective of a person who's like good at the party.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Not someone who you're like, oh my gosh, do they have to be
All
here?
right.
It's like they're actually kind of quite functional, but
Yes.
underneath something else is shifting.
Mm,
Um, what I was going to say is I think sometimes right now when people are together, underneath it, they're like daydreaming about returning home to be alone. Or
oh,
like, they're like, well, I could be watching that thing, or I could be shutting down, or I could be disconnecting. It might feel easier. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some people are not like that, but I feel like I
there
feel
are
like
people like that.
community and connection is harder these days. And like as the theater is crumbling, it feels like nobody wants to go anymore, and film is crumbling, and like massive concerts are good, but and maybe again this is my age and I'm ignorant, I'm not sure, but togetherness is just different
I think
pre post
togetherness is
pandemic.
different. I
Yeah,
think
what do you
it's,
think?
I would agree to that extent, regardless of our where we are in our age group, because I think each of us have different thresholds for togetherness too, regardless of age, right?
Yeah.
So, someone who's younger who, maybe was about to start high school and there was the pandemic shutdowns that, and they were not allowed to socialize to that extent. So I think that is also, approaching those situations of being social is different
Mm.
now, depending
Mhm.
on each of our experiences. So I think it may not be the same for every person, regardless of your age and everything else that is part of your identity. But I
Yeah,
think there is something where we're maybe learning, relearning a few
yeah,
things.
yeah.
Um,
Which
but I
is
think,
good too. Which is when you say it, like I love that. That we all have our own perspectives and our own lives and histories that we bring to this moment. And can we create these spaces where those thoughts are activated or those difficulties are activated? And I think the theater.
mhm,
Or when I teach, it's like how do we create this safe space in a room where everyone can sort of
yes.
scream their discomforts, and
Yeah,
then
I feel like we'll definitely have to have another chat about that because I'm always curious about the teaching of arts,
uh
especially theater. Um, so so in terms of Gerald, who's, the character in Versus, mm, who and where are you drawing from? Because his character seems to be very over everything, overstimulated, over overworked,
overworked,
undervalued.
undervalued. There's a good
I'm just
tagline.
throwing those words there, right?
Totally.
So, you know, what are you drawing from in terms of like your sources for creating that character, and also, and then I'll follow up with something else after.
Mhm. Maybe I want to save my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel, and Guillermo and I and Anne-Marie Kerr as well, a co-creator, and also so Guillermo and Anne-Marie are co-directing this version of it. We also have Michelle Ramsey, who's the lighting director, who comes in, Jillian Gallo, who's the costume designer, Jacob Willis, who's the stage manager, and also so all the voices in the room and are always important. And the way that I work, did I miss? Oh, and David Messia, who's the sound designer. So they're all collaborators, and I believe we say they're co-creators as well, because
Hmm.
the impetus, I guess, again, comes from me and my experience, but or my observations. But then we just sort of riff on stuff.
Yes.
I feel like I need to back up. So when I make a play, my process is 1,000 hours of improv, and then we start whittling down. So
Yes.
there's a lot of like, okay, what if we put this guy in the morning? What does that look like? And
Mhm.
then I do my morning routine with my kids and how that goes, and
Yes.
then we layer on fictions and fictions and fictions to make it more complicated.
Mhm.
Does that answer that question?
Yeah, it does. It does. It's, it starts in one way and then it becomes kind of more and more of the character
Yeah.
that you can envision.
That's it. And then what best serves the narrative? So even today, we hit a point where like, what do we do? What is the last 6 beats of this show?
Hmm.
And it's art's hard. I mean, I'm a firm believer, like when it's not working, you're correct. If you feel like it's boring or it's like, I don't know, you're correct, and like gotta keep digging. So, and that's the beauty of SummerWorks. We're gonna present it and then learn. And I think we're gonna shift every day too a little bit
Yes,
to
yes.
make sure we're telling the story right. And
Hmm.
this is part one. It's a workshop production. So anyway,
Yes. I was going
um,
to mention that, and I think I've said that in almost every interview I've done about SummerWorks, because I like that about SummerWorks in that maybe not everything is final, but I mean it's art, it's theater really final, because I think each performance will have its own nuances, right? And I think that's the nice part of it, you know.
yeah, yeah. I
Um,
think I think there's more final than what I'll be showing. Like this is definitely like, what is this piece in front of an audience? And then we'll go away and then we'll make the show that we hope will run and tour. But this is
mhm.
part one. Yeah, like I have right now it lives in the brains of the co-creators,
Yeah.
and maybe you're all gonna hate it and it's over and it should go in the garbage. I don't think so. I
I
think
would
we're
hope not. I mean, at the end of the day, the way that I even talk to friends about theater is that we go, we experience it, and then we're kind of part of this feedback loop in a way. Especially with SummerWorks, like we're giving you our energy, our how we're taking it in, and then it'd be nice to see it back, but it's okay if you take it somewhere else, and then other audiences will also have that input into your creation.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So in terms of now that we're talking about audiences, what are some of the hopes that you have in terms of audiences engaging with Versus and Gerald Bloom?
Hmm. Um,
Or do you want us to kind of
oh, nice.
be thinking about stuff or
I don't want to prescribe anything. You're gonna think whatever you think. Like I think that's the offer of the show is ideally we're creating a state, and
Mhm.
I think that's enough. And you will identify with it, not identify with it. But I would never want to prescribe what I want you to think. I just don't want you to think it's like, meh, that would kill me. If you're like, I hate it, great. If you love it, great. It's like that in between where you're like, eh, could have been better, but people will still think that anyway. Um,
Mhm.
what do I think? I'm like, I I think with an audience, the big learning because clown bouffon, it's very. I'm very attuned to how the audience is responding,
Yeah.
and in Buffon specifically, there's a thing about the laugh, right? So you're in the room and you laugh. The person next to you doesn't laugh. You look at each other. Why are you laughing? Why aren't you laughing?
Mhm.
And that's the conversation that you have afterwards. Like, why was that funny to you? Like,
Yeah.
that was horrific, or that was offensive, or that was stupid. And then you get to talk, and I think that's good conversation after art. There's a few things in it, like I have no idea if people how they'll take it. I think some things are really funny, and then people are like, "Oh my God, it's horrific! I can't watch." Like
Mhm.
there's a couple of I think it's a little bit of a horror play.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of horror, and
Me
I
too.
always wanted to do a few things that we're doing in this version of the show.
Right.
So, which is very exciting for me. So, what do I want from the audience to react in the way that they react? And that is like the biggest gift to
Mhm.
receive that feedback.
Mhm.
Yeah. I also think so. I want to be clear about what the workshop production, what I mean by that too. So
Yes.
we have this quite grand vision of the play. It's where we have a lot more money to play with. And when I say money, I just mean time. It takes time. It's money to get artists in a room together for a long period of time is
Yes.
expensive and not astronomically expensive. But this is the version where those elements are at their what's that word? Like the frame of them.
Mhm.
Like we don't have massive sets. And there's some set pieces that could really be cool, but we simply don't have the ability to,
Sure.
we're testing this out because if it works, then maybe we'll invest in that.
Mhm.
And also in this kind of environment, in a SummerWorks environment, you get like 8 hours of tech and you can't possibly do the lights the way that you want because you're in a festival environment. So, there's some striking images that I wish we could fulfill that are, again, it's more of the frame of them, which
Yes.
it still will be satisfying. But our question is, does the play work? Does the character interest people?
Mhm.
Yeah, so again, back to audience, I'm curious afterwards, and we'll all be around chatting. Please feel free to come up. But I'll tell you one thing that you shouldn't say to someone is, you know what I would do? Uh, and my answer would be, then go do that.
Mhm.
Go do that.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's sort of we don't have to be passive audience members, but the idea is to also just be in that moment. And I find that um sometimes I'm in theaters and I feel like people are apprehensive about reacting to things, and I'm like, please let it out. I can't be the only one
Mm,
laughing or like gasping.
right.
Um,
Yeah,
so that's my one thing to add to this audience chat, in that feel confident and comfortable in
totally.
in the reaction, whether, like you said,
Yeah.
I might
I
laugh.
don't like when you do this, or why did you do that is great. Versus, I would have like made him in a red shirt. Okay, sure.
It's
Or
like
I would have had the,
PhD.
yeah, like go do that play, then go do the play with the guy in the red shirt.
Mhm.
But I agree with you, like the reaction or the gasping or like I'm angry at it. I love that. That's like, those are great conversations to have.
And I'm saying that because you also mentioned horror and that genre of, storytelling, in that that's the whole point of it. Like, we need to react in some way to
Yeah.
the way we're kind of getting the story either being told through
Yeah,
images or performing.
totally. I
Yeah.
feel like all of my plays are actually horror plays in a way. Like the horror version of my life would be my last play, Daughter, would be if my life was a horror show. If I, as a father, it would be that guy. And
Uh-huh.
before that, Bunker. It's like if I
Yes.
viewed equity like that guy, I that's the horror version.
Mm-hmm.
I like stepping into characters who are deeply flawed, not particularly they haven't done work or they don't know how to do work because I think the majority of the planet doesn't know how to do stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
we there isn't a friend of mine is doing a bouffon play called The Good Ones
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in Minnesota. Nathaniel Justiniano, who's a big Buffon guy, and I love the title. It's like you think you're one of the good ones, hey? Come to the
I
Buffon
know.
show. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's always room for improvement, is what we're getting at.
Yeah, yeah. We're all we're all works in progress. Some of us need more work than others, even in the theater, even in like, a
Mhm.
progressive audience that is predominantly quite amazing. There's still things, and I don't know. Yeah, we shouldn't rest
Yeah,
on our laurels. Yeah,
no, I appreciate you being so open and generous with your answers and what you're sharing, because I think this is why I want people to hear interviews or experience interviews with artists, because we don't often get to talk to you, or people may not feel okay to ask some questions
right.
after, right? And I think it's important that people know where ideas come from that become art, so that you can go home and then talk about it or tell your friends on social media too, right?
So
If you liked it or disliked it.
totally. And I think there's very few places on the planet where we get together in this way.
Hmm.
A community comes together and they watch a thing or receive it and they're asked to react and breathe with what's happening live in front of them. Uh, Theater is the best. It really is. So I couldn't agree more. Like, tell your friends
Tell
to
your
come.
friends.
It's a
I know.
great night out. I think I can promise that with verses. It's like a good night out. It's weird and goes weird places, and I think we're always a step ahead of you too.
Hmm.
So yeah, I love a good night out at the theater. I love a bad night out at the theater. It's all
Well, you
good.
you get talking. I think either way, it gets you talking. I want to
Okay.
make sure people know that if they're coming to Versus, it's going to be from August 9th to the 11th.
It is.
And it is at the Theater Center, one of my favorite venues in
Me
Toronto,
too. Me
close to
too.
where I live, but I'm biased. I enjoy being at the Theater Center often.
Yeah, me too.
So I want
And it's
people
in
to
the Bonnie upstairs. And
the
I will say
bigger.
also theater upstairs. Yeah, and the Bonnie the theater center has been amazing to us in the process of creating this and really,
Mm,
theater takes a lot of time and we've taken 5 years to get this. And there was a pandemic in the center, but
mm.
the theater center and the collaborators have really just wanted to see this thing arrive. So shout out to everybody. They're
That is
amazing.
so nice to hear. I know that I always hear good things from folks that work there. So Adam, for people who, I'm gonna put the usual contacts so that people know in the description where to go.
Yeah.
For anybody who wants to know more about your work, what's the best way for them to follow you? Is there a website, social media?
Yeah. Instagram.
Instagram.
Add Lazarus.
Yeah.
ADLazarus.
Excellent.
Mad Lazarus.
I'll be sure to tag you, obviously.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for your time. I know,
Sure.
like I said, you've just been rehearsing, so I think you get to enjoy the rest of your evening, I hope.
I'm gonna go for an ice cream.
Yes, me too.
Ah!